you don't always have to respond to everything they say and everything they feel. This works great when you're talking about politics, by the way. Hey, friends, 5 ways to better boundaries with addicts and toxic people. That's what we're talking about. Now, here's the thing. I've been sober from drugs and alcohol for 16 years, but I'm a recovering addict and also codependent. So if you came to this channel and you're thinking, I have addiction issues, that's okay. This is for you too, because a lot of people that struggle with addictions, we have terrible boundaries, right? They say when you take the booze away from someone, you have a codependent. Is that true? I believe that it is, or at least most addicts struggle with these codependency issues. So this channel is about both of those things. But the first thing that's really core when it comes to developing better boundaries is really just to work on separating yourself and your emotions from the other person. You've all heard the concept of enmeshment. Oh my gosh, those two are totally enmeshed. Well, what that means is if you struggle with boundaries, a lot of times you don't really have a strong sense of what you want and who you are. I struggled with this for years. I didn't really know what my own emotions were. I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't have a very strong internal locus of control. So I tended to respond and react to everyone else's emotions. Does that make sense? In other words, my emotions and their emotions were all caught up in this big mess. And so you have to work on separating that out. Like, what do I feel? Because a lot of times we don't know. Okay. We may have been taught to stuff those emotions. So we know what the other person's feeling or thinking. We've stuffed our own feelings. And so a lot of times the only feelings we really know are their feelings. Well, that's a bad way to have strong boundaries, right? You see what I mean? So, I mean, how do you do this? It takes a lot of time and it can be challenging. Years ago, I had a friend who's actually a therapist. She passed away, unfortunately. Amazing lady. And she said, when you're with someone, imagine like just a plastic sheet or a wall kind of around you. I know that sounds really weird, but it works. And the idea is you just have to practice this daily to consciously think of yourself as a separate individual, that you don't always have to respond to everything they say and everything they feel. Okay. And so gradually, as you do this, you can begin to develop separation. This works great when you're talking about politics, by the way. I mean, it's like, whoa, you just got to separate yourself, but it works for everything, really, because it's all about autonomy. How am I different, right? So, number one is just work on separating yourself and your emotions from the other person. So it's easier to do this when you know who you are. So the number two way to begin to develop better boundaries with alcoholics, with toxic people, with anybody really, is to get to know yourself. Get to know yourself better. What do I like? What do I want? What do I need? What am I actually feeling right now? Okay. And this took me years because once I removed all the booze out of my life, I realized I still had horrible boundaries. I couldn't stand up for myself. I didn't know what I was feeling, and I really didn't know who I was. But I certainly knew what everybody else was feeling and all that. So this kind of ties back into number one, where we're developing that sense of separation. Okay. But in a nutshell, a lot of times what happens throughout the lives of people that struggle with not only addictions but codependency at its core is a lack of self, a denial of self, or an abandonment of self. So we tend to put everyone else's feelings and needs above our own. A lot of times we actually don't know we're doing it because we were taught to do it when we were super, super young. And so we stuff our own feelings and emotions and just kind of respond to everyone else's. And we don't really know who we are, what we want, and what we feel. So when we can begin to do this, that's when we really can begin to heal. And a lot of times it's just thinking about it. It's like, okay, someone crashed my boundaries. And a lot of times we might just let them do it, or we'll be really passive aggressive where we'll just scream and yell, but we don't actually know why we're being triggered or what it is we need. And the more we can know ourselves and what we need and then begin to express that, right, the easier it's going to be to look at someone and say, you know what, I'm not feeling heard. This is what I need. When you crash this boundary, it makes me feel like I don't exist, like you don't care how I feel. And so that can be huge because it can help us figure out what we need. So often when we feel triggered by someone crashing our boundaries, this took me a while to figure out, was that it made me feel invisible and that they didn't hear me. Okay. And because I didn't know what I needed, it was very easy for them to then come in and crash the boundary and basically tell me what it was I really did want, or who I really was, or, oh, you like it when I do that. Remember last time it all worked out and blah 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 blah, right? And so then you relent, you give the person what they want. Not only was your boundary crashed, but you didn't feel heard. Once again, you tried to feel heard and you didn't feel heard. And once you begin to get in touch with that and you see that, it can really start to help you as you deal with people. Because now, like when I'm dealing with people and they're not hearing me, I don't deal with them anymore unless I have to. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like obviously if they're family and stuff with boundaries, you have to keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it's very very frustrating. But that you begin to understand, like out there in the world, who's going to be manipulative and who you kind of need to stay away from, because there are people that don't hear you. Right? It's like, dude, I've said 5 times I don't want to go to that movie. You're not hearing me. And but you have to have the self-awareness and the self-esteem and everything to begin to see, right, I have needs, I can stand up for myself, I do matter, and I do have a choice. And so knowing ourselves and separating ourselves from others, what also ties into this is just believing that you have a choice. Okay, because a lot of people that struggle with poor boundaries, it's not that we don't um, have a choice, it's that we actually think and have been programmed since we were very little that we're not allowed to say no. You are allowed to say no, but it's an innate belief, and it takes a lot of work to change. So that's why when people are dealing with addicts and somebody tells them, you just need to kick them out and have strong boundaries and blah, 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 that drives me crazy because that doesn't work with someone who's struggling with not knowing who they are and not being able to have boundaries because they don't feel heard, and they struggle separating themselves from the other person. You have to work through all this stuff and take baby steps. You can't just tell a codependent person they just have to kick their kid out. I mean, my brother died of alcoholism. My parents enabled him, for 20 years. Did they have terrible boundaries? Yeah, they did. They did. Whose fault was it? Nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's a dysfunctional family system. It's nobody's fault. So if you have alcoholic kids, it's not your fault. Okay, so get that through your head and then just begin to work on, who am I? What do I need? What boundaries are going to work for me? Like what can I start with? Kind of baby steps, okay? So we've got work on separating yourself, know yourself. And the third thing that's super important with having strong boundaries is to have a support system to get help, because we don't know what's wrong until we know what's right. Period. if you don't have healthy people in your life, you can't spot the unhealthy ones, right? The forest for the trees. Like if you're surrounded by this dysfunction, boundary crashers, addicts, narcissists, or a bunch more codependent people, codependency can also be controlling. It's very hard to know. So once you have the support of people that are helping you with those boundaries, you can begin to look and see what's not healthy and what needs to change. But you can't do it alone. Furthermore, is if you're surrounded by unhealthy people all the time, you don't have anything healthy to lean on. You can't make better choices. You don't, if you don't have a support system, right? We're wired, the Lord wired us for connection and people. You're going to fall back onto that unhealthy support system. So, having a strong support system is huge. The number four way to help when you struggle with poor boundaries, to help you create better boundaries, is to practice, play these scenarios out. So I remember one time I needed help years ago with all these codependency issues, and I was in therapy and I had to do something. And I could not, for the life of me, separate what I needed to do and other people's reactions. It was crazy. It took like 3 months for this therapist just kept saying, and by the way, I'm training to become an alcohol and drug therapist. So so I'm learning all this stuff, along the way. But years ago, we're sitting there and I'm like, well, I can't do that because this will happen and this person will react this way and that way. And going back to number one, where, separating yourself, I could not separate how they would react based on what I needed to do. Like I couldn't separate the two things. And she kept saying, no, you have to do this for you. So when you make decisions, you make them because it's what you need, and you have to let the chips fall where they may. And for someone who's codependent, that seems impossible because we don't think we matter. So everything we do, right, that external locus of control, everything we do is based on all this stuff outside of ourselves. Nope, it's the other way around. I need to do this. I need to make this decision and do this. And then whatever else happens is not my problem. I know that's crazy, but it's not your problem. Obviously, within reason. I'm not saying you just go through life and don't think about anyone else. But again, we're talking about people who struggle with boundaries, with saying no. So, a lot of times it's again because we don't believe we have a choice and we don't believe we're allowed to say no. So, one of the things I like to do is when something happens that's crashing my boundaries, I think about, well, why does this bother me? And is it valid? And if it's valid, I figure out, okay, so I think I'll say something or do something. And then I'm petrified. But then I think, okay, well, what will I say? So instead of being passive aggressive and ignoring it or screaming and yelling, you kind of figure it out. Okay, what would I say? How would I say it? Right. And then you may even need to practice it a little bit and then realize, yes, I do have a choice. I can say no. I can do A, B, C, D, and E. The reason I can do these things is because this is valid. This person crashed my boundary, and I have a right to say no and to not do A, B, C, or D. And then oftentimes you will act on that. Okay. And then you play out the scenario. So, what's the worst thing that can happen? They're going to get mad. Right? If you tell the alcoholic no, he's gonna get mad. Of course they're gonna get I mean, that's what they do. Right? Anybody you enable is gonna get mad when you stop giving them free stuff. That's just what they do. Right? But it's triggering, especially if it's a family member, because it started early in childhood probably. You're all triggered and afraid. So you kinda have to think through it and then have a support system. What do I do if they rage? What do I do if they get angry? Well, you can do this, you can do that. So coming up with those solutions and playing it out can be very, very helpful because you do have a choice. All right. So work on separating yourself and your emotions from others, getting to know yourself. What do I want? What do I need? Number two. Number three, getting help, having a great support system. Number four is play it out. Work on strategies. It's a lot of work, I know, but it pays off in the end. And finally, number five is be kind to yourself and don't beat yourself up when you fail, because I've been working on this stuff my whole life and I still suck at it. I do. But it's gotten better. Um I don't think, if you're like me and you've really struggled with addiction, with codependency, with this struggling to know who you are and all these sorts of things, what can happen is it's just kind of a lifelong process, right? It can be a struggle. A lot of times I feel like I'm doing really good, and then other times I'm like, am I ever going to ever be free of this? Like, am I always going to be like super codependent, And the answer is like yes and no. But the thing of it is that boundary crashers are always going to do what they do. And so it can be very frustrating to not be heard. And as you're beginning to build up your self-esteem and dealing with these types of people and having to repeat yourself multiple times. I mean, I recently had a situation where I said, I'm done working on this project because you guys have revised it 18 times and this is the last thing. They didn't even hear me. They just, oh, we need this. No, I said I was done. Then the manager comes, oh, we need that. No, you guys don't have any revision policies, like, you know what I mean? And it was so frustrating because it was like I had to repeat myself like 8 times, the same thing. So it's very frustrating. And sometimes you just give in and you just give them what they want so they'll shut up. And I get it. Happens all the time. So just don't beat yourself up. Pick yourself up and try again. All right? I hope that these things were helpful to you. There's many other ways to create solid boundaries. What are yours? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. That would be awesome. And also, if you are struggling or you have a family member that struggles with addictions or codependency, I'd love to send you my free sobriety resource. It's pretty cool. It's just got things like the importance of, forgiveness and reconciliation, not the same thing. But, it talks about that. It talks about the difference between AA and NA and Celebrate Recovery. It's got some helplines and meeting locators and stuff like that. And I'd love to give you that for free. You can email me, and my email is genuinelife@jodystevens.org.